Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I've got to admit to all of you here ahead of today's episode how excited I've been to chat with today's guest. Not only is he a fellow Floridian, but I would argue I see a lot of business models, a lot of pricing models, a lot of things about all different types of businesses. Today's guest, I would argue, has one of the most brilliant pricing structures that is so well aligned with the clients that he serves, and I love his mission to help small businesses succeed. And of course, he's one of us. He's a fellow entrepreneur. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Mike Paradise. Mike wears quite a few hats in life and in business. Not only is he a husband and a father to two amazing kids, he's also the CFO of Chirocare of Florida, where they've scaled from 6 chiropractic and wellness clinics to 10, with 3 more acquisitions planned along the way, all while maintaining or reducing headcount. And I feel like when we throw that word scale around in business terms, that's what it's all about, is doing more with fewer resources. And just to go even further, what Mike loves doing is he's the founder of Paradise Automation Solutions, where they help small business owners implement AI and automations, both sides of the coin there, throughout their businesses. I'm very excited to dive deep into the work that he does. It's going to benefit all of us to hear the way that he thinks about business. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Mike Paradise. All right, Mike, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for those kind words. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Heck yes, likewise. Well, there's a lot that we're going to chat about business, but before we get there, you've got to take us beyond the bio. Who's Mike? How did you start doing all these cool things?
Sure. Well, I'll try to keep it as short and sweet as I possibly can, but I started my career in the Big Four industry with PwC. Very quickly learned I was not on the partner track, nor did I want to be on the partner track. But I think more importantly, learned where I did want to go, and that was more inside of business. So I kind of switched and jumped into finance. I worked in the corporate finance team, corporate FP&A team for Ryder, Fortune 500 trucking logistics company. And then again, just continued my my evolution of learning of where I want to go and what I want to do, and didn't particularly enjoy corporate America. So bounced around to some private equity portfolio companies, worked my way up in the finance and accounting departments there, and just loved the impact that I was able to have on a smaller company. And about 4.5 years ago, I joined Chirocare Florida as the CFO, with the intention of building and scaling and ultimately rolling up and hopefully looking for an acquisition in the near future.
Yeah, I love that overview, Mike, because I'll be honest, as the host of this show, I always, when I do my research on guests and obviously reading their questionnaires, going through their entire professional background and of course their businesses, usually something jumps out at me that, this person loves marketing. This person loves operations. This person loves technology. When I look at your background and your journey up to this point, it's hard to pick just one thing. It seems to me like you see all of the different facets of business and how they play together. We can pick on your CFO hat. We could pick on your automation hat, your technology hat, your operations hat, that big word scale, which we're inevitably going to talk about. How do all these things play into the way that you think about business holistically? Because it seems like it bleeds into the way that you show up across all the functions you play.
For sure. That's a great question. So I think one of my mantras is a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think that it's important, especially in business, to have an understanding of the entire landscape. And ultimately, coming from, again, a finance and accounting background, the numbers are really what tell the story. So connecting all of those dots is incredibly important. I think from a CFO perspective, there are a lot of different types of CFOs depending upon what the company is in need of, whether you're going public and you need, strong investor relations or IPO driven CFO, whether you're, again, trying to scale and you're looking for a more operational CFO, which is definitely my forte and my passion. But look, I'm also a people person. I also care about the employees, the what we do, how we do it. We want to make, we're building an environment, we're building a culture. I think there's a lot of things that go into play, and ultimately, kind of the secret sauce is then how does that tie into the numbers, right? How do the financials reflect what we're doing and the story that we're trying to tell?
Yeah, Mike, you and I are both throwing that S word around quite freely here in our conversation already of scale. We've got to talk about that because I kind of teased my personal definition of scale at the very top of today's episode. To me, it's growing more. It's growing your revenue without needing to do that exact proportionate growth in resources, whether that's manpower, whether that's money invested, whether you measure your resources in any which way. If you're just doubling your revenue, but also it takes double the costs and double the manpower to do so, that's just growth in my book. Talk to me about your definition of scale, because it just seems to me like headcount, that's clearly one of the metrics you pay attention to. Growth in the revenue column, that obviously is super important to you. How do you view scale?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think you have to look at both sides of the scale, no pun intended, but obviously top line growth, but also either sustenance or, eliminating some of the expenses as best you can. A lot of the inherent growth requires some additional expenditure. I personally have started to really focus in on the metric of profit per employee. I think that is crucial. I think it's really, really a measurable stat that all small businesses should focus on. And I think with the advancement in technology, again, from an automation, from an AI perspective, it has kind of unlocked the ability to control that, to focus on that, and to improve that in a number of different ways. And so, yeah, I mean, you mentioned I joined Chirocare. We were 6 clinics. We have grown to 10 clinics and have 3 more planned acquisitions by the end of this year. So doubling, obviously, from a quantity perspective and volume perspective, more so because, again, we've had growth within those clinics as well. But we've been able to eliminate headcount. We've been able to do more with the same numbers of headcount in certain departments. And there's a lot that I can go off of on that. I think that has unlocked, advancement in our employees, which has also helped the business in itself grow by providing them, more opportunities for higher value work, higher impact work. Again, the rising tide lifts all boats. They're happier, they're doing more, and it's providing more value to the company itself. And I think the tools that are there are just it's just the tip of the iceberg with what it's allowing us to accomplish.
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to keep your CFO hat on a little bit because I already know the natural segue that we're going to take to talk about automations, but you brought up expenses, and I've actually never asked this question in over 1,200 episodes, but with your CFO hat on and the fact that you're operating at scale, when I hear the word expenses, I really wonder where your CFO mind goes, because I've listened to the Dave Ramseys of the world, and we all grew up with different circumstances around money. I come from an immigrant family. My mom always said that phrase of money doesn't grow on trees. But I also, as a millennial, I love all the comments I see on social media where people say, yeah, my $5 latte every single day is not going to be enough for me to one day have a down payment. And there's all these different attitudes about cutting costs versus using and leveraging our resources to fuel our growth. What's your attitude towards expenses? Because we can cut expenses until the cows come home, but there's also that concept of leverage. So how do you find that right balance? Because it is so delicate.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to kind of start at the finish line, right? What's your goal? Of course, you can cut expenses, all the way, and it will handicap you and strap you to actually, whether it's grow, whether it's, again, scale, we keep using that word, but what are you looking to do, right? If you are looking to grow, if you are looking to scale, growing the expenses it's an inevitable action. It's just, you have to be mindful in how you do that, in where you do that, and really being able to extract as much top line as you possibly can out of every dollar that you're adding, right? I think that's the mindset that I'm always considering. It's not one track. It's not, we need to reduce expenses. It's what are we spending on? What is that providing us? And is there a better way? Always thinking about, is there a better way, regardless of how much or how little something costs, because again, it's having the finish line in mind that will ultimately guide you to do what's needed to be done.
Yeah, it's cool getting inside your strategic mind. You brought up a metric that, again, I don't hear enough people talking about, of the profit per employee. And Mike, recently I was just scrolling through LinkedIn and I saw this study that looked at how many employees are needed. This is specifically for the S&P 500. It's a little bit different scale than what most of us are operating on, but how many employees are needed at S&P 500 companies to generate $1 million in revenue? In 1990, that number was 8. But in the 2020s, we are getting that number as low as 2 employees to generate $1 million. Of course, so much of that happens through technology. So much of that happens through automations. AI is only accelerating this trend that we're seeing, both in big enterprise level businesses, but very fortunately also in small businesses. So of course, that's the natural segue. I'd love for you to talk to listeners about what you're doing with Paradise Automation Agency, because the work there, I would imagine that it replicates a lot of the work you see as a CFO, but you're bringing it to those small business clients.
For sure, 100%. I think first and foremost, you can't have fun in the sandbox of AI and automations without the proper foundations. And that's where, in my experience throughout my career, I've noticed small businesses lack the most, right? That being truly defined processes and sustainable and accurate data. If you don't have those, then any of the advancements in technology, it's not going to do anything for you, right? So I think first and foremost, the most important thing is to develop a plan to make sure you're capturing all the data that you can, to make sure your data is accurate, is representable of what you're trying to measure, and then your processes, right? If you can't speak it, then it's not real. It's not sustainable. Defining that out, I think, again, the little things are what a lot of people, especially in the small business industries, miss, right? And that's just natural, because you start small, you're doing everything, you're growing, and I mean, Brian, I'm sure life is putting out constant fires, right? So there's little to no time to actually build the foundation the way that it's supposed to be done, to document the processes, and to really take a step back and kind of audit what you've done and what you're doing to see, hey, is this still the best way to do things? Is there a better way? So what I like to do is first have those conversations, figure out, what are you currently doing? What do you want to do? What do you need to do? And then let's figure out the best way that we can that we can get to that. We can get to that point, right? Whether it's engaging customers more, whether it's collecting your data, collecting better data, and then using fewer resources from a headcount perspective to do so. And I think that's the biggest benefit of where AI and automation has allowed small businesses to take advantage of, because previously, any change in what you were doing theoretically would require a new person or an additional person. And I think we can actually work backwards, and we have been working backwards from that mindset.
Yeah, Mike, it's interesting hearing you talk about the way that you approach this from the business first mindset. You're not even talking about technology yet, which I think shows the value in your business perspective and experiences that you bring to the table. But when I think about the conversations you inevitably must be having with existing clients, but even potential clients, I would imagine so many of them can't even see what can and should be automated or what can and should be leveraging AI. It's funny, anytime I talk to fellow podcasters, the topic that always comes up is they say, Brian, how are you running a 7-day-a-week show? Of course, there's a lot of workflows that happen behind the scenes. And truth be told, we only got here because we expanded from 3 days a week to 5 days a week to 7 days a week. Each one of those iterations came through more automations and more implementation of AI. But that involved us taking a huge step back as a team and all of us talking about the different pieces of our workflows. What's your observation when you go into a company? It seems to me like you have that 30,000 foot view vantage point that they may not have. How do you start to make sense of internal processes and workflows to figure out what can and should be automated?
It's just a communication, right? I don't approach things. I don't come in and say this needs to be done, that needs to be done, right? We work towards, again, the finish line. What is the goal? What is the objective? What are you currently doing? What are you looking to get out of it, right? And then let's discuss, let's collaborate, let's figure out the best plan together, right? I think, you brought up a really good point. I think a lot of small business owners and operators are just blind to even the possibilities or the capabilities of technology, right? So in an effort to cause as little disruption and ripple effects as possible when you come in and you change a process, because again, there's that component too. If anybody has ever gone through, whether it's a software implementation or a complete revamp of a system or a process, it's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. There's certainly right ways to do things. There's certainly wrong ways to do things. And the goal is to have a successful transition as quickly as possible. But that, again, it's not an overnight thing, right? So I think the conversation is more along the lines of what are you, the business owner, the operator, what are you looking to accomplish? What are you currently doing? And let's lay out the steps that I think would be most beneficial to start to right the ship, so to speak.
Yeah, and when I hear you talk about that, I really appreciate how differentiated you call out both AI and automations. Automations have been around for a long time. AI has been around for a long time, but obviously more accessible to us now than it ever has been. What's so important to you about separating those two things? Because I, as a business owner who leverages those things, it's really important to me to understand what can be automated versus what needs AI's input. How do you approach that conversation with business owners, keeping in mind that probably most of the clients you're working with are not technically savvy, that they're operators, they're running their businesses for a reason?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest way to differentiate, in my opinion, are automations are static, workflows and processes that the same thing is going to happen every time, whether it's manipulating data from one spreadsheet to another, capturing, lead forms from, web forms to your Airtable or to your Google Sheet or whatever it may be. And then even sending a message or sending, again, a static message where here's the trigger, and then step 1, step 2, step 3, this is what's going to happen. When there's a bit more of some consciousness needed, some thought, some differentiation, that's where AI comes into play. And frankly, I think the majority of small businesses need to just focus on automations to start. Again, it's defining out their processes. It's figuring out how can we eliminate all of the routine, the mundane, the lowest level tasks that are being done. Let's get those off of an employee's plate. Let's free them up to do more higher value work. And then you can kind of work into AI and see how that can integrate into your systems as well.
Yeah, Mike, as the host of this show, I know that a lot of listeners will hear the word automations and automatically think this must be expensive. And I'm totally going to put you on the spot here. It's been the thing I've been most excited about to hear your perspective on. To me, you have the most brilliant and customer aligned pricing models that maybe I've ever seen across any industry. Talk to us about that approach, because I love how aligned you are with the interest, because you and your clients are both aligned to automate and streamline as many of their workflows as possible. What does that look like from a pricing perspective? Of course, you don't have to name numbers or anything because those change over time, but I'd love for you to talk to us about the model that powers your pricing.
Yeah. I landed on this model just to be a little bit different as well, and it's worked out pretty well. But basically, I like to charge a retainer up front. One time, call it a setup cost, regardless of the projects at scale. Now, that being said, I do have productized services for, someone who wants, an email automation or a singular productized service. But what I've come to notice is once you kind of unlock the capabilities, more and more comes to the surface as far as what can be done and what needs to be done. So I've kind of landed on a model where, like I said, I look for a retainer, a one-time upfront setup cost, and then I charge basically by the operation from an automation standpoint, right? So there are some automations where there's super heavy data transfer across multiple steps, and those utilize a lot more services. And then there's some that are super light, right? There are some that need to be run once a day or once a week even, and there are some that need to be run every 5 minutes, right? And so there are a lot of different ways to capture that value, and that's kind of where I've landed, is having a bit of a variable component with the amount of work that you're utilizing, and that's what you're going to pay for, right? I'm not looking to I should say this. I am looking to break the mold from an agency model perspective. I think this is a time where new technology and new services call for kind of a new train of thought and a new way to do things. And this is my stab at it.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely brilliant. I very much put myself in your potential client's shoes. And what I think about is, well, it would be great to bring Mike on board because, of course, I pay the setup fee. You get to know my business. You start building things and setting up the integrations that you need across all of our tools. But at that point, once you automate one thing for us, as you said, we're going to want more automations. However, from a business owner perspective, then I have to calculate, well, how much am I going to gain if Mike builds more automations? And I think that this is so aligned that the more that we automate, we directly reap the rewards of those operations. And that's my ROI. That's the positive impact on my business. Give us some use cases, Mike, because I clearly am such a big fan of the type of work that you do. But I'd love for listeners to start viewing their own businesses through the lens of cherry picking those low-hanging fruit automations that they probably don't even realize they could take advantage of.
Yeah, no, totally. I will give you two different ones that we have implemented in Chirocare, and we've implemented them essentially by need. The first, we recently had an employee retire. And so, again, we could have backfilled their position, but a lot of what they were doing was maintaining records, was following up, was reaching out for very old claims and understanding kind of what the status is there. And that has been fully automated at this point. So the first thing I did about a year ago was move from Google Sheets to Airtable for all of our spreadsheets. And that has just kind of organized the entire all the employees in ways that weren't available before. And so for this one automation, we have basically worked through a status change that now sends a fax to an insurance company notifying them of treatment, that then sends another letter to an attorney that then tracks all of that back into the home database. Another example is a clinic that we recently acquired. One of the employees didn't want to stay on board after the acquisition, which again is fairly normal when you're acquiring businesses. And this employee had a very specific set of responsibilities in that she managed one process. Department of Transportation physical exams, and she did everything from reaching out to previous patients whose licenses were expiring and they were due for another exam. She would reach out the month before, get the calendar filled up. She would do that by sending a postcard, handwritten, following up with a phone call, following up with text messages, emails, and that was her entire job. So when she left, that was a bit of a hole for us. And again, that process was completely automated as well. Everything from creating a postcard to sending it to implementing a voice agent for a phone call to get an appointment set. That includes like a warm transfer to our front desk at the clinic. So again, thinking of their time as well, right? Where they don't need to be spending, countless hours on the phone. It's as soon as the phone rings for them, they have the patient on the line and they're ready to book and they're ready to schedule them. Automated text reminders, automated email reminders. Again, those are two examples just off the top of my head that came from a position of need. Obviously, we were losing some people, and instead of replacing, their salaries and what we were paying them, which frankly would be more with the way wages are these days, we were able to do a better job in that sense because it's regimented, right? It's strictly, this is going to happen. There's nothing that falls through the cracks. Where with humans, like, we get distracted or we have a lot on our plate, and things don't always happen in the same cadence that they should. And this is again just allowed us to do more with less in that sense. But to answer the second part of that question, just what can other businesses do? I mean, again, a lot with the data that you currently have, but even more with things that you're not doing, right, from a customer service perspective and outreach perspective, and not just generating leads but servicing your own clients, right? Like, are you reaching out to them on their birthday? Are you providing communicating different ways of having sales or providing value, or again, the opportunities are endless. You can be really creative, but that's kind of where the conversations go between myself and to somebody to understand what's the goal, what are we looking to do, and then let's talk about creative ways that we can accomplish that.
Yeah, gosh, Mike, I knew that time would fly by with you here today. Every interview flies by for me, but this one in particular, just because I absolutely love the type of work that you're doing. I'm going to throw in, I pretty much never do this on the air, I'm going to throw in a quick tease that in a few minutes here, we're going to drop a link to Mike's website where you can book a call. Because if you're hearing him talk about all these things and you're thinking, well, I guess I would need someone like Mike to look at my business. Well, the book a call button is absolutely massive everywhere on his website. So you're going to be able to get a hold of that. But before I let you drop those links on listeners, Mike, I'm so excited to hear the way you answer this last question because it's super broad. I ask every guest it, and I always love the various answers that we get to it. And that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and knowing that you are one of us, you're a fellow entrepreneur yourself, what's that piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
Never stop learning. Never stop learning. I think there's so much content out there. There is a ton of really, really awesome things being done by really awesome people. Find what you're interested in and never stop learning. I'm doing that obviously with my agency, with the business I'm running now. I'm launching a newsletter in 2 weeks. It's called nocodeai.mba, and it's basically my kind of spin on explaining workflows and automations and integrating AI to somebody who doesn't know anything about that. So if you want to follow that, keep it on the lookout. But yeah, never stop learning, and hopefully I can help contribute to some education down the road.
Yes, I love that advice for our listeners. Mike, you've got more cool things going on than I even realized. Sign me up for the newsletter. That is super exciting coming out of your side of the world. And I think you're making my life easy today as a natural segue to drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, you can go to paradiseautomation.agency, or you can go to nocodeai.mba. Both of which I'd love to have you, and hopefully we can talk more.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Mike, I'm also going to throw this out there even while we're on the air, because I think everyone should check out your website. I even love your logo. That is a rare logo that I'm like, let's put it on a baseball hat, because that's pretty sweet branding. So huge kudos to you and everything that you're doing. I also just want to emphasize before we wrap up here that I love the fact that you're doing this for small businesses. A lot of people, when they tune into podcast episodes, they might think, oh, this is for someone who's far beyond where I'm at. You specifically call out, you love working with businesses who have less than 50 employees, all the way down to no employees, just the founder. And I think that that's really important. So huge kudos to you and all the things that you're doing. Listeners, find those links down below. Otherwise, Mike, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Brian, thank you so much. This was fun. I appreciate it.